Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's honestly a bit of a mind bender: human freedom. We tend to instinctively equate freedom with just having absolutely no rules. But when we actually dig into historical texts and philosophical frameworks, a really surprising architecture emerges. It turns out, true freedom actually requires a highly careful system of constraints.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the ideal of freedom, then move into defining freedom and Swaraj. After that, we'll look at why we need constraints, explore J.S. Mill's harm principle, compare negative versus positive liberty, and finally put it all to the test with freedom of expression.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the ideal of freedom and the heroic struggles behind it.
You know, throughout history, people have literally given up everything to fight domination. But what exactly is that perfect ideal they were fighting for? Well, Subhash Chandra Bose summed it up famously back in 1929. He said, "True freedom is an all-encompassing, all-round freedom." We're talking about an ideal that totally shatters caste barriers, economic inequality, and political bondage. It's definitely not just about one specific group getting their way. It's about emancipating the individual and the entire society as a whole. But fighting for this grand ideal comes at a staggering personal cost. To achieve this, leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi sacrificed being with her dying husband, choosing to stay under house arrest to overcome fear and stand with her people. And just think about Nelson Mandela. He traded all the simple, everyday joys of youth, hanging out with friends, wearing his favorite clothes, his love of boxing, for 27 years in jail, often in solitary confinement, all to battle the apartheid regime. They gave up their own personal freedom to secure the collective freedom of their people. Moving on to Section 2, let's actually define freedom and the concept of Swaraj. So at its core, freedom is really often defined as the absence of external constraints, basically living without coercion. But that's only half the story. True freedom absolutely must also include the presence of conditions that actually allow individuals to develop their creativity and their talents. A truly free society enables its members to pursue their interests with a minimum of social constraints, allowing them to fully blossom. We see this beautiful dual meaning perfectly paralleled in a concept of Swaraj from Indian political thought. As Mahatma Gandhi highlighted in his 1909 work, Hind Swaraj, it translates to both rule of the self and rule over the self, meaning true liberation comes from learning to rule ourselves, redeeming our self-respect, and acting with deep self-responsibility. Freedom isn't just taking away the chains, it's what you build once those chains are gone. Which brings us to Section 3. Why we actually need constraints and the core paradox of it all. To actually be a free society, we desperately need rules. Without constraints, competing ambitions and scarce resources rapidly push communities straight into chaos. I mean, think about something as trivial as road rage or fighting over a parking space at the grocery store, all the way up to massive societal disputes. We inherently require mechanisms to settle conflicts so we can actually live together. So the crucial point here is that we have to distinguish between necessary rules and unjust domination. While we absolutely must fiercely fight systemic oppression like colonial rule, the apartheid system in South Africa, ingrained caste inequality, or extreme economic disparity, we still need justifiable mechanisms. We need laws that allow us to respect our differences without one group bullying the other. Let's jump into Section 4 and look at J.S. Mill's harm principle. How do we decide which rules are fair and which cross the line into oppression? Where exactly is the boundary? Well, in his famous essay on liberty, the philosopher John Stuart Mill gave us a brilliantly simple intellectual toolkit called the harm principle. He basically divides human behavior into two categories. First, you have self-regarding actions. These only affect you. For these, the state should never interfere. It's the ultimate, that's my business, I'll do what I want zone. But then you have other regarding actions, actions that have consequences for other people. If your actions cause serious harm to someone else, that's when the state can rightfully step in to constrain you. Now, Mill makes a really vital distinction about the severity of the harm. Say your neighbor plays loud music in their apartment. That is only a minor harm. It absolutely deserves social disapproval from annoyed neighbors. Maybe you refuse to greet them in the hallway or give them a dirty look. But it definitely does not warrant a visit from the police. Law and force are strictly reserved for serious harm. The constitutional discussions in India echo this delicate balance perfectly, using the term reasonable restrictions. This means any limit placed on our freedom must be justifiable by reason, and above all, it's got to be proportionate.
If the state hands out life imprisonment for a minor offense, that restriction is wildly excessive. If restrictions become a habit, we risk destroying the very condition of freedom in society altogether. All right, moving into Section 5, negative versus positive liberty. First, we have negative liberty, which is essentially freedom from. It's about drawing a sacred, inviolable circle around yourself where absolutely no external authority can interfere. It answers the question, over what area am I master? On the flip side, we have positive liberty, which is freedom to. Supported by thinkers all across the spectrum, from Karl Marx to Mahatma Gandhi, this views freedom not just as being left alone, but as society actually providing you with the enabling material, educational, and political conditions you need to govern yourself and succeed in life. Positive liberty suggests that an individual is exactly like a flower. You can't just drop a seed on concrete, step back, and say, hey, you are free to grow. That's not going to work. You have to actively provide fertile soil, gentle sun, and adequate water. In human terms, that means jobs, education, resources, and the ability to participate in decision-making. The individual can only truly blossom when society creates these positive, enabling conditions. Let's hit Section 6, freedom of expression. Let's put these grand theories to the ultimate real-world test, freedom of expression. This belongs firmly in that minimum area of non-interference we just talked about. It's a fundamental value, perfectly captured by Voltaire's famous assertion that even if we strongly disapprove of what someone says, we must defend to the death their right to say it. True freedom of expression means a society has to be willing to tolerate views and ideas that we might personally completely disagree with, as long as they aren't causing serious, direct harm or inciting violence. And we see this friction literally all the time in our culture. People frequently demand that authorities restrict speech they find offensive. For example, filmmaker Deepa Mehta faced intense protests over her movie about widows in Varanasi, which actually forced her to relocate filming entirely. Similarly, Aubrey Manon's book Ramayana Retold faced massive demands for a ban. Banning is often an easy, short-term solution, for sure, but it chips away at that sacred circle of liberty we value so much. These scenarios really reveal how social constraints bleed into our everyday lives, forcing us to constantly ask who actually has the authority to dictate our personal choices. It's not always the government, right? Sometimes it's our community, our peers, or institutions that try to enforce conformity. Take something as simple and everyday as what you wear. Does a dress code diminish your freedom? Consider the mandatory Mao suits in China aimed at enforcing equality, or a cleric issuing a fatwa against tennis star Sania Mirza over her athletic wear, or even the everyday rules dictating white uniforms in Test cricket, or the uniform you had to wear to school as a kid. So I want to leave you with this to ponder. Does choosing your clothes belong in that sacred, inviolable circle of negative liberty, completely free from interference? Or is it a choice that external authorities, whether that's the state, a religious leader, or a school board, can rightfully control for the sake of equality, tradition, or discipline? As we've seen, freedom is never just black and white. It's a constant, vital negotiation. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the rules around you.